Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhamman Sangham Namasami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Good afternoon, fellow YouTubers. I hope you're all doing well and have a lovely start to the week. Let me just have a quick sip of my drink first. Okay, so last week I covered a topic, a very important topic called the Four Noble Truths. Okay, and in that I discussed, I'll give you a quick overview for those of you who are unaware or haven't watched the video. So the Four Noble Truths is basically life is suffering, or the truth of suffering. What is the origin of suffering? Where does it come from? What is the cessation of suffering? In other words, how to stop and eradicate the suffering. And then what is the path of the cessation of suffering? Okay, so now what I want to do is the fourth one is the path to the cessation of suffering, is the eightfold path. And in that video I did mention that I need to do another video on the eightfold path because I didn't want to sort of jam it all into one video. So what I've done is today I'm going to cover the eightfold path, hopefully to the best of my ability, and you guys get a relatively good understanding of it, okay? So what we need to firstly ask ourselves, what is the Noble Eightfold Path? So let me try and give a detailed explanation. Basically the Noble Eightfold Path in Pali, it translates to ariya, aṭṭhaṅgita, magga, okay? That in Pali represents the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, this is one of the main core practical teachings the Buddha laid out for us all to understand. So it forms the fourth of the Four Noble Truths, which is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. This we discussed in last week's video on the Four Noble Truths, as I mentioned, hence why we need to do this topic today, okay? And I can elaborate in more detail. So this was also outlined by the Buddha in his first sermon after enlightenment. Now this sutta, or this discourse the Buddha actually laid out to his disciples and possibly lay people at the time, was called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, okay? The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Now, that sutta basically represents setting in motion the wheel of Dharma, okay? So, for those of you that want to look into that sutta, specific sutta, you can go onto a website called Access to Insight, and there's another one called Sutta Central as well. If you go in there and you type in the search bar, you should be able to find the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and you'll be able to read it yourselves, okay? So symbolically, it's represented by the Dhamma Chakra, which is the Dharma wheel, and it's got 8 spokes which are corresponding to 8 of the eightfold path, 8 factors, of the eightfold path. Now, this path is often referred to as the middle way, which entails the avoidance of extremes when it comes to things like sensual indulgence, and on the other hand, severe asceticism as well. So it's not a strict linear sequence of steps, but it's more of an interconnected set of practices that we can use to support and reinforce each other. So having progress in one of these 8 factors actually helps strengthen the others, and this leads to ethical conduct and mental discipline, and then essentially panya, wisdom. So the ethical moral conduct we can refer to as sila, I'll talk a bit about that later, and panya as well is the wisdom factor. Okay, so this path is traditionally grouped into 3 sections, okay, or you can call divisions, and we basically call this the threefold training, okay? 3 different sequences called the threefold training. So to explain those, basically number 1 is the panya factor, the wisdom factor, which are the first two factors, 1 and 2, or the first two of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is right view and right intention, okay? Now, then we have ethical conduct, or sila. And now sila, those factors are 3 to 5, which is right speech, right action, and then right livelihood. And then lastly, the third of the threefold training is the mental development side of it, or we can also refer to these as samadhi, or even the section directed for meditation practitioners. So these factors cover 6 to 8 of the Noble Eightfold Path, and we have basically here 6 being right effort, 7 being right mindfulness, and then lastly number 8 is right concentration, or right samadhi we can call, or sama samadhi. So symbolically, it's actually represented by the Dharma chakra, or in English, the Dharma wheel. So it has 8 spokes corresponding and representing the 8 factors, okay? So I've printed out a quick image for you guys, just so you can have a look at the wheel. For those of you Buddhist people, if you've been reading books, or you've got a relatively good understanding of Buddhism, I dare say you've seen this before. But for those of you who haven't, I just did a quick print up, and it looks like this, okay? So it's just a wheel or a logo that we have. It's not really a logo, that's a pretty bad terminology for it. But it's essentially a symbol, a symbolization in Buddhism, okay? So when we see this brings up the remembrance of the Eightfold Path for us Buddhist people. So let's go into these 8 factors in detail, and I'll try my best to explain them for you. So each factor starts with the word right, okay? And in Pali we call this samma, okay? So in Pali it's called samma, so meaning complete, balanced, or perfect, balanced, or even aligned with reality, and essentially leading to liberation. So now number 1 of the 8 factors we have, and the first one is called right view. So this would be called samaditi. Samaditi. This is a very important factor, right view, okay? Now this means to understand the true nature of reality, primarily through the 4 noble truths, okay? So understanding the 4 noble truths, we get this understanding of the true nature of reality. So as we covered in last week's video, we have the knowledge of knowing that suffering exists. It has a root cause, which is craving, or tanha, knowing that it can end, and then the knowledge that there is a path leading to its end, okay? It also includes insight into impermanence, which we call anicca, suffering, which we call dukkha, and anatta, which we call non-self. This is the core foundation, all right? So without the correct understanding of this, practice inevitably will lack direction. And number 2, we have right intention, okay? Now this is called samma sankappa. Samma sankappa, also called right thought, or you could even say right resolve. So what this is cultivating intentions of renunciation. So letting go of sensual desires and attachments and clinging and craving, whilst maintaining goodwill, which is metta, loving kindness, and having a calming nature and harmlessness towards ourselves and others, and obviously non-violence, okay? So it involves purifying the mind from greed, things like hatred and delusion, and committing to ethical and mental self-improvement. So that's that one. Number 3, we have right speech, which we call samma vacha, okay? Ethical communication. So that is abstaining from lying and divisive speech. So what that means is basically not to speak ill words and not to create gossip that harms relationships, and that can include harsh or abusive words, and also things like idle chatter as well. So essentially speech should be truthful, it should be unifying, kind, meaningful, promoting harmony and also understanding, okay? Not only to oneself, but to everyone around them, all right? Number 4, we have right action. So right action is basically called samma kammanta. Samma kammanta. This entails ethical body conduct. So refraining from killing or harming living beings, stealing, and also sexual misconduct as well. And it promotes actions that are peaceful, honest, respectful, and they often align with the 5 precepts as well. So the precepts, the basic 5 precepts for lay people, a very brief summary, is just no killing, number 1. Number 2, no stealing. Number 3, no sexual misconduct. Number 4, no lying, so being truthful, kind, and sincere with nice, kind words. And then number 5 is no drinks and drugs, which lead to carelessness, okay? So that is that one. The next one we have is right livelihood. So we call this samma ajiva. Samma ajiva. This basically boils down to earning a living in a way that does not harm others. And that basically means to avoid trades that involve things like the selling of weapons, intoxicants, meat production, like killing animals, poisons, or even things like exploitation, you know. Examples of this could be things like slavery, fraud, prostitution, things like that. So these are things we definitely want to avoid. Some of those are for obvious reasons, but yeah, we want to avoid that. So it's imperative that we choose wisely the occupations that support not only ethical living, but benefit this society as a whole, okay? Number 6, we have right effort. Now, right effort is called samma vayama. Samma vayama. This is the 3rd section of the threefold trainings. So this is to create a strong mental energy and clarity of mind, to cultivate genuine wholesome states. We can do this by applying techniques like metta, like loving kindness, and also reflecting on things like anicca, impermanence, to let them fade away without actually giving them any attention. We want to achieve this all whilst abandoning any unwholesome ones, all right? So unwholesome ones being emotions like jealousy, anger, doubt. This involves guarding things like our 6 sense doors and avoiding potential triggers like unskillful or negative company, and even influential things like different forms of media, you know, like social media and pornography and all these negative things. Especially in this day and age, social media, it used to be television. Television kind of faded out, and now it's predominantly things like, you know, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Snapchat, and YouTube, and, you know, list goes on. There's so many different platforms, and some of these you can utilize, but some of these can also be very influential, so we have to be very delicate with our decision making, okay? So specifically speaking, it is it's basically preventing unarisen, wholesome negative states from coming to the surface, and then abandoning the ones that may have already arisen in us. So we need to be aware of this, okay? It's also to have the effort to cultivate positive good states that have not yet arisen. And then lastly, is to muster up the effort to maintain and to try and perfect the wholesome positive states that we've already that are already recognizable within ourselves, okay? So the next one is number 7 of the Eightfold Path, which is right mindfulness. And we call this samma sati, okay? Samma sati. So clear awareness and attention to the present moment. Now, this section we understand by practicing things like the 4 foundations of mindfulness. I also did a video which I covered last week. So to reiterate that, we have number 1, kayanupassana, which means contemplation of the body, being number 1. So things like that, we could, for example, contemplate the breathing. We can contemplate things like the 32 parts of the body. So that's the first section, kayanupassana. Number 2, we have Vedana Upasana, which is contemplation of feelings. So be it pleasant feelings, be it unpleasant feelings, or be it neutral feelings, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And we want to do that by looking within the body internally and also externally. So feelings that we may have on the surface of our skin could be the external, and then obviously feelings internally. So that's how we want to look at Vedana Upasana, which is the second foundation of 4 foundations of mindfulness. Thirdly, we have Chitta Upasana, so contemplation of mind states. Now, this is basically thoughts and things like this which are arising, and we can contemplate these. Like I said, I did a video last week explaining the 4 foundations, so I don't want to go too much into it. Lastly is mind objects, phenomena or dharmas, and we call this Dhamma Upasana, okay? So they're the 4 foundations, and this aids us in our practice to understand and comprehend alertness and how things arise and pass away, okay? So essentially, being in the present moment as much as we can. This is very important, and we refer to this in Buddhism as sati sampajanya, which means mindfulness with clear comprehension. And that's pretty much covering that one. Now, the last one, number 8, we have right concentration, which is samma samadhi. Now, that is developing deep meditative absorptions, or we like to call these jhanas, through our focused attention. This often will occur when our attention is on a single object, for example, like the breath. We call this anapanasati, which this does. What this does is it leads to unified awareness and various tranquil states of mind. And it also provides a foundation for insight and also liberation. So I'll do another video on jhanas in the coming weeks, but to summarize, there are 4 main jhanas. A very brief run through of these, the first jhana being the detachment of sensual pleasures and unwholesome states, and then number 2 being the mind becoming sort of more refined, and it enters states of happiness, bliss, joy, rapture, piti, and a firm state of one-pointedness, which is basically born from concentration, okay? The third jhana would be the fading of rapture, and then abiding in equanimous happiness and bliss. So one gains mindfulness with clear comprehension, as we discussed, sati sampajanya, and we do this with like an equanimous kind of happiness, so essentially equanimity, or we call this upekkha, okay? And the fourth one, the 4th jhana, or the 4th absorption, is basically the abandonment of pleasure and pain, and it's the purity of mindfulness, a very deep purity of mindfulness, and this is with equanimity, okay? So sort of pleasure and pain, it kind of fades away, and then we go into a different kind of subtle layer, and essentially it's born with like a very pure sense of mindfulness, of being in the present moment, and also with equanimity. So this whole notion of, you know, going from one emotion to another, we're very level, we have a very level equanimous mindset, and that is a very good thing. So that's this is probably the most stable of the 4th jhana, the 4 jhanas, but like I said, I'll do a whole other video on the subject of jhanas in the coming weeks, okay? So there it is, pretty much. Hopefully I've discussed them relatively in depth enough for you guys to understand. We have the practicing of the Noble Eightfold Path, and what it does, it cultivates virtue and it calms the mind, okay? What it does, essentially, it fosters panya, or wisdom, and ultimately it's leading us to the end of suffering, and it's the realization of nirvana, okay? So it's, you know, it's essentially, it's a lifelong holistic journey which can apply to both monastics and lay people alike. So it's something that we need to not only understand, we need to incorporate in our lives and also practice, okay? So understanding the 4 noble truths and then the Eightfold Path, this will eradicate suffering and give us a very deep understanding of suffering and the notion of suffering, how we can stop and eradicate the suffering. And the Eightfold Path shows us how we can go about doing this. Okay, so that's all I'm going to talk about today on the Eightfold Path. I don't want to go into too much detail, and again, like I said in the previous videos, I don't want to make these too long and sort of outdrawn and have people falling asleep and things like that. That's not really what I'm setting out to do. I just want to give us all a comprehensive kind of understanding of these topics. I call these formulas that the Buddha's laid out for us. And then once we have this understanding, this can really enhance and improve our practice, our meditation practice, but also mindfulness, and it can teach us how to be a better person in our day-to-day lives, and not how to shoot to our emotions and desires and cravings and clinging and attachment and aversion and craving and all of these essentially kilesas. This is showing us how to deal and navigate our way through these things. Okay, so thank you for watching my video. Hopefully it was informative enough. Any questions, you guys are more than welcome to shoot through me an email or DM me on my social media profiles. I do check them from time to time. I don't go on there too much. I go on Facebook more than any of the other ones. I kind of really don't go near TikTok and Instagram and stuff, but I do post short 1-minute clips that I do on YouTube, more daily motivational stuff. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Te Rawan Sanai. And until next time, I'll probably do another one this week actually. I'm not sure what on yet, but I'll have a look into it. Okay, so Te Rawan Sanai everyone, and have a happy, blessed week. Okay, blessings from the Triple Gem. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.